Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third week of our Crop Hour webinar series. For anyone new here, my name is Shelby Pritchard, and I am the Integrated Pest Management Specialist here at SDSU, as well as the moderator for this webinar series. I appreciate all of you taking time out of your morning to be here with us today. A couple quick reminders: there will be a short poll that will pop up at the end of the talk. It'll be up for about 2 minutes. We ask that you please fill that out. Also, while the poll is up, I will pull up the CCA credit for anyone who needs that. And then today we will be having Febina Mathew as our speaker. She is an associate professor and field crops pathologist here at South Dakota State University, and her focus is on diversity and management of pathogens causing diseases of broadleaf and oilseed crops in South Dakota. And today she's going to be giving a talk titled Fungicides Against Phomopsis in Sunflower. So take it away.
Thank you, Shelby. Morning, everybody. Shelby, could I just get a thumbs up if you can hear me all right? Just want to do a last minute sound check.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. I think it's a bright day outside, still cold. And of course, we are cooped up in our respective places. And I don't know if that means it's the best time to learn all about sunflowers, but with the hope that sunflowers were timely harvested last year, I'm guessing we have lots to look into as this season comes in, and that's in particular if you are planning to grow sunflowers. So today I just wanted to touch base on a disease that has been yield-limiting in South Dakota, as well as a few other states in the United States, which are known to be major producers of sunflowers. So we're talking Minnesota, North Dakota, and with South Dakota, 80% of the production in the Northern Great Plains. And a disease that has gained a lot of attention in the last 20 years is what we call Phomopsis stem Kinka. South Dakota State has been big into research on Phomopsis. And one of the key things that we have been focusing in the last 7.5 years that I have been here at SDSU has been to find solutions for farmers. And we also work in close collaboration with North Dakota State University, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and University of Minnesota to get some of this research going. All right, so what I'm going to be talking today is just a general introduction on sunflower diseases, how weather conditions can impact or tell us what diseases to see or expect for each growing season. And then some of the current problems that we have with Phomopsis being one of the major diseases with specific focus on the yield losses. And then we're also looking at the fungicide research that we have done in the last several years, maybe about more than 7 years. So how fungicides could be used to suppress disease, and also the farmers can see yield benefit as well as economic benefit in response to fungicide is what we're going to see. And I'm also going to briefly touch on the topic for fungicide resistance, just because that's going to be really big in the coming years. Right, and let's see. There you go. So as I indicated earlier in my presentation, the 3 states where we see the bulk of the sunflower production in the United States are Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Now, on the right side, I've got fields that has been surveyed on a bi-yearly basis by the Sunflower Commodity Checkoff. So that's the National Sunflower Association. And you can see the bulk concentration are in the Dakotas. And then there are scatters in the states below the Dakotas. So you have Nebraska all the way up to Texas. Now, as we look at the states, we could also tell that weather conditions are going to be very different between the Dakotas and, say, Texas, for example. So in the Dakotas, we see typically wetter, cooler conditions, while in Texas, we have dry, hot conditions. And why that is important is because some of the diseases that we see on an yearly basis is driven by these weather conditions. So in the Dakotas, what we have been seeing in the last 7.5 years, would be diseases like downy mildew, which is a seedling disease that is caused by a fungal-like organism. It's not a fungi, it's a fungal-like organism that can only be managed by using a combination of seed treatments and host resistance. From a black stem, it's a disease that has gained our attention in the last, I want to say 4 to 5 years, and that's just because it's been prevalent, and we think the conditions driving that would be mostly hot, dry conditions. But it seems to also show up when the conditions seem to be cool. So there is not a whole lot of research done on former black stem, but that's something on our radar in our coming years. Phomopsis stemcanker is the disease that I'm going to be focusing on my talk, so I'm going to leave it for the slides to come. Rust and sclerotinia diseases, they are again driven by cooler conditions and also humidity. We do have fungicides that are effective against rust. We do have commercial hybrids that are effective against rust. But for sclerotinia diseases, although we have done fungicide trials, the results have not been consistent across location years. So what I want to say is it's really a tough disease to control. And genetics is something that the companies as well as the public breeding program and Fargo has been looking into. Now, on the flip side, when we look down at Texas, we see common diseases like former black stem and rust, but there are also other diseases like rhizopus head rot and verticillium wilt, which love the dry heat conditions that is down in Texas. So let's look at Phomopsis stemcanker. So Phomopsis stemcanker is caused by several fungi. They are not occurring one after the other. Like it's not like, if you have 10 plants, you have 10 different fungi. It could be a single plant that can carry up to 4 different fungi at the same time, all belonging to the same family called Phomopsis. So we have reported about 5 fungi that can cause this disease in the United States. But if you consider the sunflower producing countries in the world, including the United States, we're looking at more than 20 fungi that can cause this disease. And the catch with this is, although we say there are different fungi involved in the disease, the symptoms cannot be distinguished among fungi. I mean, they look the same. Yield losses typically would be about a 40% or above, which means if you're expecting a good year to get you a yield of about 2,000 pounds per acre for sunflowers, we are going to see a 40% loss of that. So if I do the math quickly in my head, it's you're losing at least some 800 pounds per acre just because of the presence of this disease. Now, this disease is prevalent when the sunflower enters the adult stages. So we do get to see brown lesions on the leaf. And this is a stage we call R1. And I have a picture of what R1 looks like, but it's basically when the floral head sits on the plant. So you see this brown lesion starting right here. It goes along the leaf veins to get into the petiole. And then when the sunflower starts to bloom, it's the R5 stage, or I call it the selfie stage because that's typically when people are out there taking pictures. But that's the stage when we get to see this characteristic stem discoloration on discoloration on the stem. And then that is an indicator of the fact that the farmer may have Phomopsis stemcanker in his field. Now, I recreated a lot of this. We do have a Phomopsis nursery, which is about 5-10 minutes north of the SDSU campus here in Brookings. And this is a year where we planted susceptible hybrids, meaning there's no resistance whatsoever in these commercial hybrids. And you can see these sunflowers were approximately 2 months prior to harvest, and they were already starting to lodge and fall down basically from the disease. So in addition to causing stem lodging, plant death, we also see a reduction in head size. So what I have on the right side is a normal sized sunflower head, and the ones on the left side has got these small heads, which is because of the Phomopsis infection. Now, the problems that we have seen in the last 7.5 years, we have identified alternative hosts, meaning these fungi have a broad host range. They don't just infect sunflowers, they can also be problematic on crops like soybean, which is a big crop for South Dakota producers. And they are also able to live on weeds. And weeds, as you know, few weeds like Kochia, for example, they are resistant to herbicide. So if we don't do a proper management of these weeds, it's granted that fungi such as Phomopsis could be living on the weeds and then become sort of a inoculum reservoir for the sunflowers when it gets planted. So I've got some numbers here. In this graph, we're just comparing the soybean production versus sunflower production. If you see between 2005 to 2016, the production of soybean has kind of expanded. And for sunflowers, it's kind of been pushed just to the Dakotas. And what happens as a result of this is when we have common diseases between soybean and sunflowers, it's quite likely that the prevalence of these diseases, be it Phomopsis, Sclerotinia, they're just going to be increasing. And that's just because there are common host between these causal fungi. I've also got a graph just to give you guys an indication of what it is looking for sunflowers as far as the common diseases are concerned with soybean. So we have Sclerotinia, which seems to be on a rise in 2016. The graph finishes pretty much with 2016, but for Phomopsis, it started to again increase over the years. So if I say between 2011 to 2019, we're looking at disease prevalence, meaning the number of fields that are positive for diseases to be anywhere between 32 to 70%. Now, in addition to the fact that soybean production could be problematic to sunflowers, we also have weather conditions that can play an important role when it comes to disease development. So as I indicated, factors driving disease development would be precipitation and temperature. Let's take a look at the 30-year average. Pay attention to the Dakotas. You can see that there is a drastic change between what it was 30 years ago and now. The temperature has become maybe a little more warmer, and as we get closer to the harvest season, we are starting to see more rain. This is again a breakup of years when we have Phomopsis issues, and this is going by state. The graph again finishes with 2015, but you can see that the Phomopsis stem canker is not just a problem here in South Dakota, but it's also a problem in North Dakota, Minnesota, CHP, Central High Plains states, and then Texas. And this is some data that's coming from the 2021 National Sunflower Association survey. We're still finding the disease to be a problem in the sunflower producing states. So you can see the 100% is an indication that the fungus seems to be spread in all the fields that has been surveyed. So we have 100% for South Dakota, Colorado, North Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska. So what we have been doing in the last 7.5 years, one of the big things that we try to look at is what exactly is the effect of Phomopsis stem canker on sunflower yield. And then I would be walking through the remaining objectives. So in order to be able to do some statistical analysis to see what it means by when we say 40% yield loss, we conducted fungicide trials in 4 states, Minnesota, North Dakota, Nebraska, and South Dakota, between 2009, 2015, and 2020. So we did a total of about 79 trials, and that's what we call location years. The production practices were followed pretty much what was recommended from South Dakota State University. We also use fungicides because these are fungicide trials, and we were trying to look at their efficacy against Phomopsis stem canker. So we focused on 3 chemistries, what I call the QOI, quinone outside inhibitors, which is FRAC11, the triazole, FRAC3, and succinate dehydrogenase, HI, that is your FRAC7. These trials were evaluated under natural disease pressure, meaning we allowed the disease to naturally develop without inoculating the trials. We used either a tractor mount sprayer or a backpack sprayer, so only ground application was used. We, depending on the logistics, availability of the seeds, we went between the oils and non-oils. Those are the 2 major classes in sunflowers. And then depending on the varieties or the year, we chose between susceptible, resistant, and there were years where we planted both. So after flowering, that's the R5 growth stage, we evaluated for disease severity, and we had a rating system that we used. So we went out, and these are small plot trials. So we rated at least 10 plants in each plot for diseases. And then we got the yield data at the end of the season, adjusted it to 10% moisture, and we performed statistical analysis at the plot level. So what we're seeing here in layman language really is that we are seeing a dramatic decrease in yield with the disease severity picking up for Phomopsis stem canker. So I want you to just follow along the green lines, blue or red, but you can see disease severity index is basically an indicator of both disease severity, which means how severe the disease is, and disease incidence, which is the number of plants that are present in the infected plants that are present in the field. It's a combination of both. So when the disease severity index picks up to about 45%, I want to say yield losses are occurring, but it's somewhere between like 0 to maybe less than 100 pounds per acre. But after it hits the 45% mark, it starts to dip down. It just goes down. And so what we are saying is that for every 10% increase in disease severity index associated with Phomopsis stem Kinka, we're seeing at least a 400 pound per acre decrease in yield. So what does that mean in terms of prices? Well, according to the 2020 market price for sunflowers, we're looking for at least $65 an acre for oils and $92 an acre for non-oils. Now, since we know that Phomopsis stem Kinka is an yield-limiting disease, some of the work that we had started was to check to see what fungicides are going to work against Phomopsis. So the next few slides, I will be talking about the response of sunflower to the fungicides and also the net return associated with fungicide application. So going back to the same data set, what we did was we sprayed the fungicides, and it was any of the chemistries. It could be the QIs, it could be the triazole or STHI, or the combination, so what we call the premixes, or it could be tan mixed. And we sprayed at what we call the R1 growth stage. So this, or the picture on the left, is what we call the V8. It's a late vegetative growth stage. And then we have R1, that's when the miniature floral head sits right on the plant. And then we have the R5. R5 is when the sunflowers are bloom. So when the sprayer, so this is the growth stage that we chose. So when the sprayer goes in, we make sure that it hits right on the floral head, and so that the fungicide is able to protect the head from subsequent infection. So we assessed for disease severity. We got the yield data. What we were finding was that more than 70% of the trials, out of 48 trials, had a significant effect in disease reduction when fungicides were applied, which means fungicides worked for 70% of the trials. And we also saw a modest yield gain for more than 70% of the trials when the fungicides were applied. Now, among the fungicide groups, though, there were differences, and we were able to find that only fungicides containing QOI, or the combination of the three chemistries, had outperformed the no fungicide control. So which means that if I have a no fungicide control and a QOI fungicide, a QOI fungicide seems to be doing better. But if I were to use a DMI fungicide and compare it with a no fungicide control, the DMI did not do anything to protect the crop from fungicide stem Kinka. And I'm going to break it down even further from the technical jargon. So what we're seeing is, if you were to apply a single application of QOI, and let's take headline as an example, at R1 growth stage, you would see a significant reduction in disease severity, so a little over 35%, and a yield increase of at least 5%. And I've got some data out here. So how we interpret this particular graph is, the longer the bar, it means the disease pressure is pretty high. So we can see for no treated control, that is where fungicide was not sprayed, we were able to establish a disease pressure of at least 90%. Now, shorter the bar means the fungicides worked. And if you look closely at the active ingredients that were present in the fungicides, you could see that any product containing pyraclostrobin seems to have an edge. Now, with yield, we're looking at the other way. So taller the bar means we are seeing a significant yield increase. The no fungicide control right here is less than a 1500. But if you look at the top chemicals, any chemical containing pyraclostrobin, or you have picoxystrobin right here, or azoxystrobin right here, so anything containing the QOI seems to be very effective against Phomopsis stem Kinka. So if we do the quick math, we are looking at least a 500 to 600 pound per acre increase upon using the fungicide. So I've got some pictures. Now, this picture was taken approximately 2 months before the sunflowers were getting ready for harvest. So what I have on the right side is a no fungicide check, and you can see how sad the sunflower plants are looking. They're pretty hit hard by Phomopsis stem canker. They're already starting to droop. And the picture on the left side is where the headline was sprayed, and we don't get to see anything on the stem. They look pretty green, and they seem to be more healthier than the no fungicide check. All right, so let's do some math quickly on the net return. So we obtained some prices from the South Dakota retailers, and I'm going to focus on headline, which is currently priced at about $6 an acre. We also obtained cost for fungicide application. Ground is between 5.5 to 8 and aerial between 9 to 12. The grain prices for 2020 was at 26.3 for non-oils and 18.7 for oils. And I want to thank the South Dakota Oilseed Council for getting me all this information to be able to do some math to see if the farmers were going to see any economic benefit upon spraying the fungicide. So what we did were two things. One, we calculated the minimum yield that is needed to cover the cost of the fungicide. Now, when I say cost of the fungicide is not just the cost of the fungicide product, but it also includes the application cost. So maybe you're choosing between a ground sprayer versus aerial sprayer. Maybe you have to hire somebody to do the spraying. So anything that involves machinery, labor, anything associated with the fungicide application is what we're looking at here for the break-even yield. And upon obtaining the price for the break-even yield, the next thing we did was to calculate to see how much of a net return we're seeing. So headline is priced at about $6 an acre. And we use the recommended rate at 6 ounces per acre, and that's about $128 per gallon. And what I have for you are the break-even yield. So what it means is, let's take the non-oils, for instance, in the ground application. We need to get at least a 54.3 pound per acre increase to see that you are able to cover the cost associated with application of fungicide. So for non-oils and aerial, we're looking at least 70.3. Oil is again 76.4 and 98.8 for oil and aerial combination. Now, this looks like a pretty busy graph, but we did combinations of oils with susceptible and oils with partially resistant. So for yield gains, we are seeing up to 800, a little over 800 pounds per acre if you were to choose an oil susceptible hybrid. And the net return kind of varied between the ground and aerial, but we're looking at a range of anywhere between 1.6 to 127.9. The key thing to keep in mind is that the net return is really dependent on the price of the sunflowers. The sunflowers currently are priced pretty well. At least for the last 3 years, we have been seeing, so for the oils to be somewhere between the $15 to $20 ballpark per hundredweight, and for the non-oils to be around 25 for an average. So if the market stays so, you are going to see a net return when upon the net return that is listed on this slide for the fungicide that you will be using to protect against Phomopsis stem canker. For partially resistant hybrid, and when I say partially resistant hybrid, one key thing to note is that these are hybrids that do not have complete resistance to Phomopsis stem canker, but it is a better option to use in the field, particularly if you have seen Phomopsis stem canker in the last 5 years. So you will see some yield benefit coming just from the genetics in comparison to the susceptible hybrid. So, the information, if the hybrid that you're selecting has partial resistance or not, will be with the seed dealer that you work with. But regardless, what we're seeing, a combination of using a partially resistant hybrid and fungicide application, we are seeing yield gains up to about 700 pounds per acre, and a net return anywhere between a little over $5 to a little over $100 an acre. Again, it varies a little bit between ground and aerial, just because the application costs vary slightly between the two types of applications. This is non-oils confections. They are currently really priced, but in my experience, they tend to be very high maintenance. And so we are looking, but yet we are looking at a comfortable yield gain of anywhere between 60 to a little over 1,200 pounds per acre. the net return being $1 to about $270 per acre between a ground and aerial application. Again, we do have some good genetics that is available for non-hybrids. The yield gain seems to be somewhat in the same range, anywhere between 0.8 to close to 1,000 pounds an acre. And for net return, we're seeing anywhere over $7 to 196.8 per acre. Now, this is going to be a new topic as far as the sunflower production is concerned. And we have been looking at this in the last couple of years here at South Dakota State, and again, in collaboration with NDSU and UNL. And I just wanted to briefly touch with what is fungicide resistance. Now, fungicide resistance basically means the fungus has become insensitive to a specific antifungal agent. Now, in our case, when we look at field crops production, we're looking at fungicide. The question really is this naturally occurring, or is it something like the fungus is developing resistance to the fungicide in the long run? Well, the story goes that there may be individuals within the fungal population that has natural resistance to the fungicide. So the best example that I have before you is COVID and the virus associated with COVID-19, that is coronavirus. So every year, every day almost now, we have been hearing about new strains being identified with single mutation to multiple mutations and so on. And if you think about it, if there is a variant that is identified in the United States today, maybe tomorrow in the news comes, okay, it has been confirmed in like about 20, 30 countries. And how does that happen? That's just because those strains are naturally present in the population with mutation. Similarly, with fungicide resistance, there are strains within the fungal population that already is mutant, meaning you spray the fungicide, the fungus is not going to be affected by the fungicide. So there are two factors that is contributing to fungicide resistance. One is the pathogen itself. The fungus is already naturally present in the population. There are strains that has natural resistance to the fungicide. And upon application of these fungicides, what happens is you're going to be killing off all the sensitive individuals, meaning strains that are sensitive to the fungicide, but the resistant one continues to live through, and they are able to cause disease just like the sensitive strain. So over time, what happens is you will end up with a fungal population that is just resistant to the fungicide, and then we start to see cases of fungicide failure out in the fields. Now, in order to manage fungicide resistance, the key recommendations that we give is apply fungicides only when necessary. If you know that your farm has got a bad history of Amoxicillin Kinka or any other diseases, and you know it's going to come back when you plant sunflowers in the farm, perhaps it's time to consider to spray a fungicide. And that makes total sense because you have to get the disease under control. But if it is a year where you know the disease is likely not to come, or if there is no need to spray, maybe we want to be able to avoid that fungicide application. And if a situation arises where we are already starting to say, okay, fungicide resistance has developed, then the next step would be to rotate fungicides with different mode of action so that we are not setting up the fungicides to fail completely. And the reason I touched on this is, so this is some new research that is coming out of South Dakota State. We did some testing of, we have tests that is already present in our lab that can monitor strains for fungicide resistance. And we do it in two ways. We have lab tests as well as greenhouse tests. And I'm not going to get into the technical jargon, but I'm just going to show or explain how we were able to confirm resistance in the fungi causing Amoxicillin Kinka to a commercial fungicide called Folicure, or what we call the tebuconazole. So this is a greenhouse experiment where we used 10 isolates each of gooey and helianthi. They are the predominant fungi causing Amoxicillin Kinka, not just in South Dakota, but also in Minnesota, North Dakota, and Nebraska. We used a susceptible hybrid, meaning the hybrid has no resistance to the fungicides and to the disease. And we obtained the seeds from New Seed Genetics. And we used a collection of isolates. We were not just focused on South Dakota, but we also included isolates from North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota. And these isolates were selected after running in vitro tests. We also have some foreign isolate. And the reason we included the foreign isolate, like the one from Australia or Yugoslavia, is because the chemistries that we use in the United States are not labeled in these countries against Phomopsis tempcanker. So what we did in the greenhouse, we raised the sunflowers and they got to what we call the V4, V6 growth stage. So pretty young seedlings. We used a backpack sprayer, and this is my technician, Nathan Braun, who's holding the backpack sprayer. We sprayed the fungicide right onto the plants using a flat pan nozzle set up at a 35 psi pressure, and we sprayed until the fungicide runoff to the stem. We allowed the fungicide to dry for 24 hours, and then we put the fungal inoculum right onto the stem. And this is my graduate student, Kartika, that is inoculating the stem with the fungal plugs. And 5 days after inoculation for GUI and 10 days after inoculation with Helianthi, what we were finding were isolates were phenotyped, or what we say grouped, into sensitive, fungicide-sensitive isolates and fungicide-resistant isolates. So let's look at the fungicide-sensitive isolates. This is a control where there was no fungicide sprayed. And we have two concentrations that is on the follicule label, 4 floral ounce per acre and 6 floral ounce per acre. And if you look at the size of the lesion, it seems to be a lot smaller than when you're not spraying a fungicide. And we're to expose it to a really high concentration, and we just took a random figure of a 24, which is about 4 times more than 6 or 6 times more than that. We're seeing a trace of the fungus being able to cause disease. Compare that with the resistant isolate. The control has got a decent lesion size on 4, 6, and even 24 for that matter. We did not see any reduction in the lesion size or disease. In fact, on 24, the stem nearly started to grow. And that's a sign that the fungus is not really affected by the application of the fungicide. So our results kind of show there were several isolates that were insensitive at the concentrations that were applied, 4 and 6, but there were also isolates that were insensitive at the lower concentration, but sensitive at the higher concentration. And that applies to both the organisms. I'm not going to read out the isolate names, but I do have a map wherein we have sort of confirmed fungicide resistance, specifically to tebuconazole. And this is for both the pathogens, or both the fungi, GUI and Helianthi. So if we take a look at South Dakota, we've got examples here for Helianthi. For North Dakota, we see both for GUI. Minnesota has got both Helianthi as well as GUI as well as Helianthi that seems to have developed resistance to the fungicide. So this is going to be a new problem now in the coming years. We are going to continue our research to look at, to see if there are strains present in the fungal population that has developed resistance to the other chemical groups, the QOI and the STHI. So I'm just going to summarize quickly over the slides, and then I'm going to open up the floor for questions or comments, ideas on how we can continue to work on this disease and deal with fungicide resistance management. The key message, really, the prevalence of Phomopsis tempcanker has increased over the years. We are looking at approximately 32% of to 70% between 2011 and 2019 for disease prevalence, meaning the number of fields that are positive for disease. The disease is yield limiting. We know in the literature that there is 40% yield loss, but what it really means is for every 10% increase in the disease severity index, we're seeing about 400 pound per acre decrease in yield. And that's pretty dramatic when it comes to economic cost. It's been about 20 years since we had the epidemic of Phomopsis tempcanker in sunflowers. And I was a PhD student at the time at NDSU, and I know that the epidemic was widespread in the Dakotas as well as the Minnesota. It was not just the company industry, the industry nurseries that went down from the disease, but I know that there were several farmers that were talking about the disease that they have not seen for at least 40 or 50 years because this disease was described for the first time in 1980s. Now, our research from SGSU, NDSU, and UNL does show there are fungicides that are effective. QOIs are a great example. So this is basically the headline family. We are seeing at least a 35% reduction in DSI and 5% yield gain. And we're also seeing a positive net return. So across oils and non-oils, anywhere between $1 to up to about $270 an acre. But besides the fungicides, we also highly recommend to use genetics, the information for if the hybrid has partial resistance or not to the fungi causing Phomopsis stem canker is with the seed dealers. So we would certainly recommend to use a combination of fungicide and partially resistant hybrid if this has been a problem in the past. Of course, the sunflowers are rotated with wheat or corn, and sunflowers usually get back into the rotation. It's like once in 3 years or once in 4 years, depending on the farm practices. Weed management is equally important. Weeds could be a potential reservoir of these fungi, so it is very important to take care of those weeds. And also, this is really logistics, but there are regions where it is hard to avoid the close proximity of some of the susceptible crops with sunflowers, like soybean and sunflowers may be grown in close proximity. But one thing to keep in mind is that if one of the crop is affected, then the other crop automatically gets affected by common diseases like Phomopsis and Sclerotinia. And then finally, with the fungicide resistance, what we are finding is that the field rate of tebuconazole may not be effective against Phomopsis stem canker. And upon doing lab test and greenhouse test, it seems like there may be strains out there that has developed insensitivity to the tebuconazole. And so as far as the other two chemical groups are concerned, the QOI and SDHI, we're still awaiting results. We are already doing the lab test and greenhouse test on that. So we will probably find out in a few months from now if there are strains out there that might have resistance. So with that, I have a big lab. I've got about 5 graduate students. I've got 2 technicians. I've also got a postdoc, undergraduate students. But I really want to also acknowledge my collaborators, NDSU, UNL, their crew, who's been really helpful in setting up a lot of these multi-state collaborations. And also want to acknowledge the South Dakota Seed Council, USDA, the National Sunflower Association for funding, and the SGSU Extension for giving me a chance to talk today and share my research on Phomopsis. So with that, I will open up the floor for questions.
All right, and Febina, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I'll go ahead and share mine with the CCA credit.
Sure. All right, well, I'm going to ask you questions here. So how many of you have seen Phomopsis stem canker in your field? Or knows what it looks like? Okay, there's one question. One person's raised. Scott, so could you please explain like how since how many years have you been seeing, or you want to share any details with the panel? Okay, well, you're excused.
Let's see. Well, while people are hopefully coming up with any questions, I'll just give a quick mention that this week in Aberdeen, we have another winter road show. It'll be at the American from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and I will provide a link in the chat that will cover more dates and details. So there's that. Give you just maybe another minute if no one has any questions.
I can get my coffee then.
Yeah. All right, well, if that is it, please join us tomorrow when we cover sunflower pests and pollinators. And thank you so much, Febina, for your time today.
Thank you, Shelby. I
Yep.
appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Have a good day, everyone.